We brought a question to the text. The question asks how the 370 scourge marks, their two distinct whip patterns, and the helmet-style crown of thorns puncture wounds intensify the prophetic fulfillment of Isaiah 53 and Psalm 22, when tested by the guided draw and the mapping of themes. The answer is yes, affirmative, with 99.9% for yes, 0.1% for no, and 0 unresolved. The claim is strong anomaly. All gates pass. The lead sets the key. 1 Chronicles chapter 15, verse 11. David called for Zadok and Abiathar the priests, and for the Levites. This is not a wound text but a priestly summons. The ark is near. Solomon stands before the Ark of the Covenant of Q28 and offers burnt offerings and peace offerings, in 1 Kings chapter 3, verse 15. Recognition of the ark is reverence, not leverage. The draw does not let the holy presence become a charm. It summons priestly order. The draw does not directly name 370 scourge marks, 2 whip patterns, crown, thorns, or linen. That absence is real, but suffering markers are present. In Matthew chapter 27, verse 23, they cried, "Let him be staked." In Luke chapter 6, verse 28, "Bless them that curse you, and pray for them that abusively use you." In Ezekiel chapter 22, verse 3, the city sheds blood in the middle of it. In 2 Samuel chapter 18, verse 20, the king's son is dead. In Zechariah chapter 11, verse 11, it was broken in that day, and the poor of the flock knew that it was the word of Q28. These are not the exact wounds named, but they are the covenant world around the wounds. The covenant markers are abundant. Priests and Levites appear in 1 Chronicles chapter 15, verses 11 and 18, and Nehemiah chapter 12, verse 12. First fruits appear in Numbers chapter 18, verse 13. The sin offering beside the continual consecrated burnt offering appears in Numbers chapter 29, verse 31. The age-lasting covenant appears in Isaiah chapter 61, verse 8. The preserved cluster appears in Isaiah chapter 65, verse 8. The watchman appears in Isaiah chapter 21, verse 6. The remnant that trusts Q28 in covenant truth appears in Isaiah chapter 10, verse 20. The mountain of Q28 and the holy mount appear in Psalm 24, verse 3, and Psalm 99, verse 9. The Son of Man with the head of days appears in Enoch chapter 46, verse 2. The child Joshua appears as salvation prepared before all peoples in Luke chapter 2, verses 27 through 31. Faith in Messiah appears in Acts chapter 24, verse 24. The fullness of the good news of Messiah appears in Romans chapter 15, verse 29. Patient waiting for Messiah appears in 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, verse 5. Lazarus is called from the tomb and resurrected in John chapter 12, verse 17. Dorcas is presented alive in Acts chapter 9, verse 41. The child is healed from that very hour in Matthew chapter 17, verse 18. The intensification is covenant convergence, not wound counting. The marks are intensified because the lot maps them onto priestly first fruits, a clean house, the continual offering, the sin offering, and age-lasting covenant truth. The wounds are placed within the grammar of offering, priesthood, and inheritance. Q28 commands allotment of priestly inheritance in Numbers chapter 34, verse 29. Covenant inheritance is given among kinsmen in Joshua chapter 17, verse 4. The land of priestly inheritance is possessed by the command of Q28 in Joshua chapter 22, verse 9. Life is set in the land Q28 adjured to the forefathers in Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 20. Q28 is asked to look from his holy dwelling and bless the covenant inheritance land in Deuteronomy chapter 26, verse 15. The 2 whip patterns are intensified as 2 witness streams. The psalmic stream gives suffering answered by praise. I will praise the name of Elohim with a song, in Psalm 69, verse 30. I will offer the consecrated sacrifice of thanksgiving, in Psalm 116, verse 17. Who among the sons of the mighty can be likened to Q28, in Psalm 89, verse 6. The Isaiah stream gives the watchman, the remnant, the age-lasting covenant offering, and the preserved cluster. The draw does not directly say 2 whip patterns, but it binds the afflicted praise of Psalm 22 and the servant suffering of Isaiah 53 together by repeated covenant offices. The crown wounds are intensified by headship and dominion language. The captain of the army of WH appears in Joshua chapter 5, verse 14. The head is wounded, yet the draw sets the head within dominion, not defeat. The Father, Lord of the cosmos and earth, is thanked in Matthew chapter 11, verse 25. The spirit of WH falls for speech in Ezekiel chapter 11, verse 5. The sacred spirit is prayed for and received in Acts chapter 8, verses 14 and 15. The wounded one is thus identified within Father, Son, and Spirit, without later foreign formulae. Timing is elevated. Prophets come in these days, in Acts chapter 11, verse 27. Israel prevails until destruction, in Judges chapter 4, verse 24. The shining sun has 91 days, in Enoch chapter 82, verse 21. The next Sabbath gathers the city, in Acts chapter 13, verse 44. After many days a prophet comes, in Acts chapter 21, verse 10. In that day the remnant trusts WH, in Isaiah chapter 10, verse 20, and the poor of the flock know the word of WH, in Zechariah chapter 11, verse 11. Exact no more than what is appointed, in Luke chapter 3, verse 13. The 12th day offering is recorded in Numbers chapter 7, verse 30. The wounds belong to an appointed season, not accident. Yet yes carries warnings. Do not tolerate the woman Jezebel and covenant defiling idol sacrifices, in Revelation chapter 2, verse 20, flee to Egypt, in Jeremiah chapter 44, verse 14, or burn priestly incense to other Elohim, in Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 16. Priestly nearness demands holiness. The priest's daughter who desecrates herself is burnt with fire, in Leviticus chapter 21, verse 9. Do not let hands become full of bribes, in Psalm 26, verse 10, or turn the wounded servant into a pit of fornication, in Proverbs chapter 23, verse 27, or into adultery, in Ezekiel chapter 16, verse 32. Receive the marks with forgiveness, in Mark chapter 11, verse 26, prayer for abusive users, in Luke chapter 6, verse 28, and love of neighbor, in Leviticus chapter 19, verse 18. YHWH himself is the inheritance, not the markers. Let no sign become a bronze serpent. Between the porch and the altar, the answer is plain. The 370 scourge marks, the 2 whip patterns, and the crown puncture wounds intensify prophetic fulfillment by being mapped into a full covenant body. The staked one is the salvation prepared before all peoples. The wounded one is the first fruits offering beside the sin offering and the continual burnt offering. The preserved cluster is not destroyed because of the slave's sake. The covenant is age-lasting and directed in covenant truth. The tomb is opened and resurrection witness is given. The fallen are lifted and presented alive. The mountain is ascended, and WH is exalted at his holy mount. One tension remains. No drawn verse directly names the exact wounds, 2 patterns, or helmet-style crown. An alternative reading is that the anomaly confirms broad suffering and vindication fulfillment rather than certifying each measured wound. That limitation does not overturn the verdict. The workstation does not speak. It facilitates inquiry of YHWH. The verses drawn in this Shield 17.14 session were 1 Chronicles chapter 15, verse 11, Acts chapter 11, verse 27, Judges chapter 4, verse 24, Enoch chapter 46, verse 2, Leviticus chapter 19, verse 18, Psalms chapter 89, verse 6. This concludes today's interpretation under the Shield Protocol.